Hello, lovely people of the internet. My name is Isabella, but you can call me Isa, Is, whatever you want. And these are all the books that I read this summer. So, to start off, the first book that I read this summer was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And I have a few thoughts about this. I really enjoyed it. I had tried to start reading it in April, but for some reason it felt like very, very slow for me. So I actually didn't kind of really start it until May. And I'm not really sure why it felt so, but when I did start it in May, finally, it still felt pretty slow. And I just couldn't seem to get into it. Like, I would read it and I thought that the premise was super interesting. I wanted to read it, but I just couldn't seem to get like super into it or anything. But then at a certain point, when the book started picking up, I think like around like here, that much into the book, about halfway through, it started picking up and I read the whole rest of the book in one day. And it kept me on my toes. I kind of got into a slump while reading it. I think it was probably because there was so much information that I was being given, but I really enjoyed the way that the main point of the book wasn't about the characters or their relationships. It was more so about the situation that Pip was in. All the characters were so fleshed out though, even if the main point of the book wasn't about the characters. And they were all very interesting. I loved Pip's character and her personality. She's just so full of energy and life and like passion, which I really loved. And Robbie was so super charming and he was so funny, and compared to Pip's melancholy, he was so charismatic. And I loved the fact that we got to see who Indy really was and not just see her through rose-colored glasses, because a lot of times victims of crimes get painted in a very, very ideal light instead of their actual personality. They may have been a bad person, but just because they died, a lot of times they'll be portrayed as somebody who's very, very good. I loved reading Pip's interviews. I think that was my favorite part of the book, reading her kind of put pieces together and figure out what exactly happened to Andy and Sal. And I loved the format of the book and the pacing. It took me a while to get into it, but I still really, really enjoyed it. I love the pacing, and I love that, after every chapter there's just some sort of piece of evidence and I loved the idea of it being about her senior capstone project. Obviously this is the American version of the book, not the British one. So in the British one it's her EPQ, I believe, but here it's her senior capstone project. And I thought that it was super cool that Pip was so passionate about Sal and Andy, so she decided to make that her senior capstone. I thought that was super cool. So for all those reasons, I gave it a 4.25 stars. It was close to 5, but it being kind of hard for me to get into at the very beginning didn't and made it into a 5. And I didn't really connect to the characters in any deep way. I still enjoyed it, and I thought that all the characters were interesting, and I would definitely recommend it if somebody asked me. So the next book that I read was We'll Always Have Summer by Jenny Han. This was my next read in June, and I have read the rest of the Summer I Turned Pretty series. I read it in 2022 when the TV show came out, and I've had this one sitting on my shelf since then, since I read the first 2 ones. But I just never felt compelled to read it. I would see it and I was like, oh, look, the Summer I Turned Pretty, but I never was like, oh, I want to read the last book. Because I think it's kind of because I already knew what would happen, and I knew the whole drama and who Belly ends up with and all that, so I just didn't really feel like I had a reason to read it. But I finally did, because it was summer and I was kind of wanting to get back into the summer vibe. But I honestly feel like it was kind of a sore way to end the series. I'm not really sure what it was about this book. It was just something weird that made it off-putting. It didn't feel the same as the other ones. I loved the first book, and it felt like a coming-of-age story, and it was just so summery and rom-comish, and I loved that. It was so similar to All the Boys book, which is one of my favorite books, and it's one of my favorite rom-coms. And the second book was full of heavy themes about grief, and it was perfectly lined up to what I was going through at the time when I read it. So it will always be a soft spot for me, the second book. But this one just kind of felt different. I think it was maybe because it didn't have the summary feeling that the first two had. Even with the themes of grief in the second book, it still felt very summary, but this one didn't. It felt kind of different. I hated Belly's character in this one, and I'm not really team anyone. I just don't like Jeremiah at all, so I guess I'm team Conrad. Jeremiah really annoys me, so I was just like, you know what, Conrad doesn't annoy me, so I guess I'm team him. But I like the ending of, spoiler for a second, you can skip a little bit. I like the ending of Conrad sending her the letters, and the fact that she cuts her hair after all that Jeremiah had said about, you know, don't cut it. I thought that that was pretty interesting, but overall this is one of my least favorite in the series. This one is my least favorite in the series. But it was still a good read and it was super entertaining for the time. It doesn't spoil the rest of the series if it's not as good. It was just kind of a lackluster ending. So for that, I gave it 3 stars. But the rest of the series is still one of my favorite ones. It has such a sweet place in my heart. It's really nostalgic. But I'm excited to see what they do with this one for the TV show because I've heard that they're gonna make some changes, I think. So I would really like to see kind of what that ends up being. And how they make this one seem more interesting because it was not as interesting for me. This was my next read, my next June read, P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han, which is by the same author as We'll Always Have Summer, and that means that I read 2 Jenny Han books in a row. I had already read To All the Boys in the beginning of the year. I think I read it in April, and I read it because I am a huge fan of the movie. It is one of my favorite movies of all time, so I was like, oh, let me just read the book. And I did, but I finally got around to reading P.S. I Still Love You, and I have not read Always and Forever Lara Jean, but I have watched all the movies a million times. They're some of my comfort rom-coms, and movie number 1 will always have a special place in my heart, and my review of that book will probably be in some other video, maybe in a video where I do a recap of all the books that I read this year. But for this one, P.S. I Still Love You, the movie is my least favorite in the movie series. I just don't really like love triangles, but I did actually like this book. The ending of To All the Boys was kind of a cliffhanger, the book, I guess. And this one was a really good continuation of what happened. Oh my god, it picks up right where it left off. And it was a really good continuation. I cannot remember for the life of me what exactly happens. I read this in the beginning of the summer, and it is currently the week after I just finished my first week of school, so I don't remember exactly what happens, but I remember that John Ambrose is not actually in a lot of this book. He's only in like the last part, like this much of the book, so that's very different from the movie. In the movie he shows up like immediately, but in the book he doesn't, and he's also very different from what he's like in the movie. And I'm not saying the way he looks or anything, I'm saying like as a character he's quite different. And Peter Kay, I love Peter Kay, and I used to be obsessed with him when the movies came out, and he's super cute in this book. I love the scene where he says, "Break my heart, Covey." That's just, even though thinking about it now, it's kind of cringe, but when you're reading a book, you kind of forget about that. So when I was reading it, I thought that it was such a cute scene. And I just find this series adorable. And these books are so good for, you know, what they are. Cheesy little rom-coms, and it does that well, and it's so good at taking you out of where you're at and like giving you a good escape. It's not like crazy romantic or anything, but it is very cute. I didn't really think about it much after I finished it. I'm probably going to read Always and Forever Lara Jean this year, but I'm going to give this one 3.5 stars because 3 is too low before it's too high. I think 3.5 is right considering this is one of my favorite movie series, but it's not one of my favorite books. So this, The Fault in Our Stars, was my next June read. I have read this book before. This is a reread. I read it in 6th grade, I think, and I vaguely remembered it. I used to really love the movie. I actually own it on Blu-ray. But this book, I honestly can't even begin to explain what it means to me as a person. This book got me through the hardship of my aunt having cancer both times. The first time I read it, my aunt had cancer, one of my aunts had cancer, and the second time I read it, another of my aunts had cancer. And anything that has to do with that touchy subject will always mean a lot to me. I'm so I've always had a really soft spot for oncology, specifically pediatric oncology. I'm considering maybe going into the field for that, so it's something that really matters a lot to me, and this book just always wrecks my heart. I love it so much, and the movie does as well. The movie is so beautiful, and I love it so much. It's such a beautiful coming-of-age story. I love Gus and Hazel's relationship. I remember swooning when I was 11 when Gus said, "I enjoy looking at beautiful people." I don't remember where he said this, like at the very beginning. Everyone knows the banger line in this book, which is, "I fell in love like falling asleep, slowly, then all at once." It's such a beautiful book. It describes the way falling in love feels like, even from a platonic standpoint. And it's just so perfect. And I love this book so much. It means a lot to me. I never failed to cry at this last scene where Gus is like, "Okay, Hazel Grace," and she says, "Okay." Oh my god, this book actually ends me. This movie also has one of my comfort songs, which is "Wait" by M83. And that song is also in 5 Feet Apart, which is also one of my comfort movies / books. So I just have a really huge soft spot for this book. I cry sometimes just thinking about it. It has so many quotable lines in it, and it's such a beautiful book to talk about grief. The church scene near the end of the book always makes me cry. I could talk about this book maybe in a video where I talk about sad rom-coms, and I could talk about that genre for hours because there's so many books and movies that fit in that category, but that would probably be for another video. And because of my personal connection to this book and the fact that I just love the characters and the prose, John Green did such a good job with the prose in this book, and I think about this book pretty often. It's a 5-star for me. Alright guys, so the next book that I read in June is one of my favorite books of all time. It's probably my favorite book of all time besides the Hunger Games series, which if you know me personally, you know that I love the Hunger Games series. It is my favorite thing of all time, and it's kind of like on a different level. Like this book is like right here, and the Hunger Games is like right here. But also in my head, the Hunger Games is just like the best thing ever made. So the book that I'm talking about is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. So I read this book last year for the first time, and I got it for my birthday. And it was the first book that I started reading after I bought it. And sometimes I'll just be sitting in my room and I'll be thinking about this book, and I'll just start laughing and just like feel all the feelings that I felt when I first read it. I love this book so much. I can't even put into words what this book makes me feel. It's just like the perfect rom-com ever. I relate to Liz so much. She's just me. We're both hopeless romantics and introvert girls who love rom-com movies and music. So, Laura Jean before she started dating Peter Kay. And I decided to reread this because I got an edit on Instagram talking about Wes Bennett, and I just remembered how much I loved him. So I was like, I'm just gonna reread it because nothing is gonna give me that same feeling, and I need that feeling right now. So I could talk about Wes for hours, maybe I will one day. The romance in this book is so good. I personally don't consider it enemies to lovers because they were only really enemies from Liz's perspective, and even so, I don't think the term enemies should be used in modern settings. They were mostly rivals for the first 5 chapters, and then they were friends. So I kind of consider this childhood rivals to friends to lovers. This book is just the perfect rom-com. I don't even know how to explain it. It gives the most warm, fuzzy feeling, and it gives you the same vibe as when you watch your favorite rom-com. And mine is Love, Rosie, 27 Dresses, and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I love Liz's obsession with movies and soundtracks. I relate so much because I'm obsessed with movie soundtracks. I have a playlist for like every situation that I've ever been in, and I listen to movie soundtracks all the time. That's mostly what I listen to. That's mostly where I find the songs that I like, and I'm just so obsessed with that, and that made me love the book even more because I could see myself a lot in Liz. Wes is the sweetest, most charming ever. I remember reading his POV of a lot of the scenes in here on Lynn's website, and it was amazing. And I will tell everyone who reads this book to read the chapters of Wes's POV because you can see how obsessed he is with Liz. My personal favorite scene in the book is the scene where they're eating in the diner. I don't know why that scene always stands out to me, but it does. It just has me giggling and kicking my feet. I have this whole book annotated and I'm gonna read some quotes actually. I liked playing piano. I liked playing in my fancy flowered pajamas with matching silk slippers. It made practicing feel like an elegant pastime, like I was an erstwhile Austen character honing one of the skills that would make me a fearsome thing to behold. And I just love that so much because that's how I think. I romanticize everything and everything that I do, and I correlate everything that I do to some sort of movie or book that I read. So when I read or when I write, I'm always like, I'm so Jane Austen right now. I'm like so Lizzie Bennet, which I think is amazing. Not if Wes and Liz got married, Liz's name would be Lizzie Bennet. I think that's just so iconic. I just have so many like scenes in here that I just absolutely adore. I love when Wes says, "You look best when you're you." That reminds me a lot of the scene in Bridget Jones' Diary when Mark Darcy says,
"Oh, I like you very much, just as you are." That
reminds me a lot of Bridget Jones' Diary, which is also a really good rom-com. But yeah, this book is just on another level for me. I have yet to read a book that feels exactly the same as this one or better than this one. I mean, in the rom-com genre, obviously. Wes Bennet just means absolutely everything to me. And if you haven't read it, go do so now because you won't regret it. So since this is one of my favorite books ever, I gave it a special rating of 6 stars, which I only give to my most favorite books ever. So please go read it, and extra chapters of Wes's POV that Lynn wrote, and I will put that the link in my description to find out. Okay, so this is the last June read, and I have been wanting to read Betting on You for a while, but every single time I went to Barnes & Nobles, they never had it in stock, so I never bought it. But after I finished reading Better Than the Movies, I craved another Lynn Painter rom-com book, and I have already read The Do-Over, so I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go buy Betting on You. And I ordered it online because my store still didn't have it. And as I knew, Lynn Painter will never let me down when it comes to her YA rom-coms. I've actually not read any of her adult ones because I've heard that they include some content that I am not going to be reading, but the YA ones are amazing. And oh my gosh, Charlie and Bailey are so awesome. I loved their dynamics so much. And at first, the book was kind of slow for me, but the second that I warmed up to the characters, I was just obsessed. I'm so happy that Lynn decided to include both Charlie and Bailey's perspective in this book because that didn't happen in The Do-Over or Better Than the Movies. And I know that it does happen in Nothing Like the Movies, which is the sequel to Better Than the Movies that is going to come out in October, which I'm praying that I won an ARC because I signed up to win an ARC and I hadn't heard. They haven't announced who won yet, so I'm really hoping that was me. But I'm really excited and excited that she included both of their perspectives because it made it easier to understand both of their motivations and both of their characters. Their banter was hilarious and it made the book. And I loved their little nicknames for each other. You know, it was so cute. Mr. Nothing and Glasses, that's just so like funny. I loved that, which is funny to me because I have glasses and sometimes I'm like, that could be me. Somebody could call me Glasses if they wanted. But it was so adorable. I was kind of scared to read the book actually because of the synopsis. It made it seem sort of like an She's All That kind of situation, and I hate betting tropes. I hate the betting trope. It actually like aggravates me. I don't like it at all. And I always have to skip that scene where the person finds out in the movies about the betting trope. But once I did read it, I understood that the trope was done very differently and handled way better. Charlie is so funny, and his obsession with cats and Gracie Abrams and Conan Gray was just so relatable. And Bailey's love for books is actually what inspired me to start this Instagram because she had her own Instagram channel, her own Instagram account, and I was like, oh, you know what? That's my push. I'm gonna make my own Instagram. And I really want to read the book that she was reading in this book. I think it was called Bringing Down the Duke. I remember that she said which one it was when they were in the Starbucks, I just skipped it. Anyways, I don't remember. I think it was Bringing Down the Duke, and it's a historical romance. But Bailey was such an interesting character, and after reading her drink Diet Coke and Coke mixed together, like drinking those together, I decided to try it, and it was really good. I have yet to try her method of eating pizza, but I actually really love this book, and I would recommend it if you also love rom-coms. Lynn Painter never fails to capture the feeling of what it's like to watch a rom-com, especially an earlier rom-com, and it was just so good. Charlie's confession scene made me squeal. I hate that word, but that is exactly what I felt when I read it. And the scene of them reading in the cafe was so cute. I love the book so much, so I'm gonna give it a 5-star. And I honestly think every Luna Painter book is an automatic 5-star for me. I think everyone should read this. And the other short stories featuring the characters from this one, Better Than the Movies and The Do-Over, was super cute. The one of them, the Christmas time one. So go read that one. Go read that if you haven't. It's super cute. And it gives you that Christmassy feeling that I crave all year long because I'm obsessed with Christmas. It's the best holiday ever. So if you have read this one, Better Than the Movies and The Do-Over, I recommend to read that little short story. And there are a lot of short stories on that website too, so go read those. So my next read was in July, and it was Good Girl, Bad Blood. And oh my gosh. So at the beginning of the video, I said that the first book I read in the summer was As Good as A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And I mentioned that I was in a bit of a reading slump when I read it, but not for Good Girl, Bad Blood. I don't really know what it was about this one that I liked more than A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but I did like it more. I think it might have been that the stakes were much higher, and also that I was already familiar with all the characters, so I didn't have to like be confused while reading it about, you know, oh my god, who's that person that just got introduced. But wow, this book is definitely my favorite one in the series. I read the whole book in 4 hours, and I was so invested. I loved seeing Pip and Robbie together and learning more about Stanley Forbes, and the ending of the book made me cry. Oh my gosh, I was so shocked while reading this book. This book may have had a little bit of a better pacing than A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and it may have had been content-wise that I liked it more. And A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was very, very fact-heavy, but since the case in this one is ongoing, it felt like it's easier to digest. I liked seeing Pip deal with her court case with Max Hastings, and seeing her develop new relationships throughout the book, especially with Nat Silva, who I absolutely love. I can't even put into words what it is about this book that I love. It was so good, and I gave it a 4.5 stars. It was almost a 5-star, but I didn't really think much about it after I finished. But I still loved it though, and I would consider this book series to be one of my favorite series, and this one is my favorite book in the series. So I imagine you guys think that if I read Good Girl, Bad Blood, I would read As Good as Dead next, right? I would read As Good as Dead next, right? Because I just finished Good Girl, Bad Blood, and I already have As Good as Dead, so obviously I would read As Good as Dead next, right? Wrong. Instead, I reread Better Than the Movies, even though I already read it 2 books before. And I mainly reread it because my friend was reading it for the first time, and hearing her talk about it made me want to reread, so I read it with her. And I also used the opportunity to fully annotate it and tab the pages where Liz would make references to movies so that I could watch them myself. There's a lot of them, as you can see. It's just quite a lot of tabs. And actually, I made a video, the first reel on my Instagram is actually the list of all the references that Liz makes, so go check that out. But yeah, my rating probably went up after reading it the 3rd time. I noticed so many details on this read, like the fact that Wes is 6 feet and 6 inches tall, and Liz wears glasses. I never realized that, so I guess In Between does match her. But yeah, so this is still a 6-star read for me. But yeah, okay, so now I did read Good as Dead, and I have mixed feelings about it. I did enjoy it because I love Holly Jackson, and there may be some spoilers in this section of the reviews, but I will put a timestamp for it, so don't worry yet. I'll put a timestamp. So I came into this book knowing that there was something that Pip does in this book that a lot of people felt was out of character, and I'm gonna say this, and I don't know if people will agree with me, but I kind of disagree to a certain point. I do think it feels like something like what it is that Pip does in this is something that A Good Girl's Guide to Murder Pip would never do or become. But from As Good as Dead Pip's perspective, I can understand why she does. I think that it was honestly just really jarring the way that parts of her personality were really, really important and prevalent in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder are missing in this book. Like the fact that she's so adamant about justice and all that stuff is kind of less part of her character in this one. The first half of the book was pretty slow and I felt it kind of dragging on. This is the part where there's going to be spoilers. So if you go to the comments, if you pause and go to the comments, there will be a time stamp for you to skip. But I honestly didn't get into the book until the part where she goes onto Andy's laptop and sees her email where she's talking about the duct taped killer. I thought it was so interesting that Andy figured that out, and I would have loved to read more about that. And I would have loved to see kind of what it was that Andy did, and that also made me realize that Andy's quite similar to Pip. And it also gave a lot of backstory to Andy's character and realizing exactly why she did what she did in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, what her motivations were, and the fact that she really did care about Becca, and you know, the whole thing, the whole reason why she wanted to leave was because she was in danger and she wanted to go back to get Becca. I was also shocked that Pip didn't realize, like right there when she read Andy's email, that the duct tape killer was Jason Bell. I figured that out when she started researching him, and it was kind of shocking that Pip didn't realize. Pip's character change was not exactly like uncomfortable, I guess, but it was more so confusing. I was very shocked at her killing Jason. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked at her killing Jason or becoming an addict. I was more so confused, especially at the fact that she would let Robbie like be an accomplice. That was crazy. Like, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Pip would not have never done that. But I think that her not telling Hawkins showed really her distrust for the justice system that had evolved at this point from the first book to this one. But the whole time I was reading it, I was just wishing she would have told someone besides Robbie. And I think that the title of the books honestly came really full circle, because this one was really a guide to murder. And I think the reason why I didn't like this one as much was because we didn't jump into a case immediately. My favorite thing about the other books was learning new things alongside Pip. Even though I said that I liked Good Girl Bad Blood because of the high stakes, the stakes in this book were even higher. But it just felt so disconnected. I will say that I did enjoy all the forensics stuff that Holly Jackson put into this one. It was a really interesting read, and seeing how Pip would get herself out of the situation she was in was interesting, and it made me want to keep reading. But I honestly felt like the book was kind of just rushed. The first half of the book was very slow, but the latter half was super fast-paced, and it wasn't necessarily a bad book, but it just lacked in comparison to the others. From a vibe standpoint, I would say that I enjoyed it, but from a writing standpoint, it felt like it lacked a lot in comparison to the amazing writing in the other books. This one was kind of like a swerve in another direction, in a direction that isn't bad but just questionable. These opinions don't really hinder my opinion of the whole series. I still love the series a lot, and it is one of my favorite series, but this one was not my favorite. I would love to know exactly what Holly Jackson was thinking when she wrote this, because I feel like that would help me understand exactly what she was thinking. I'm gonna give this one 3.5 stars, and the series as a whole is like about a 4-star series, so yeah. The next book that I read was The Summer of Broken Rules, and I actually read this book because my friend recommended it to me and she bought it for me as a birthday gift. And after reading As Good As Dead, I needed a rom-com that was summery, so I picked this one up, and oh my gosh, I'm so happy that my friend recommended it to me. She said that she did because she knew that I'm a Hugh Lynn Painter fan. The vibes were very similar, and I will say that that is true. I loved the premise of this one, and I was immediately sucked into the summery like vacation home theme. I loved all the characters, but I cannot for the life of me remember the main character's name. I remember that her sister was named Claire. Her name starts with an M. Oh, Meredith Fox. I like Meredith. She was kind of boring to me a little bit, but I still loved her. I loved her while reading it. I was like, oh, she's so cute. But I loved Wit, and I can see why everyone says that he's like Wes. The relationship was so cute, and the themes of grief and heartbreak are really well developed. I thought the niches of Meredith's character were so interesting. Like her saying that she didn't want to be called pretty. That was, you know, once you read it, you'll understand what I mean by that. And I thought that her thought process was interesting. The other characters were also very interesting, and they added a lot to the location. I was so annoyed by her cousin Lulu, or whatever her name was. Like, why was she mad about Meredith grieving her sister? Like, Lulu, she wasn't your sister. She was Meredith's sister. But anyways, the reveal at the end was pretty good. I kind of saw it coming, but I was still shocked. The book made me cry when Meredith would talk about her sister Claire. I don't remember what scene it was, but there was a scene that made me cry. But it was such a cute book, and them all playing assassin was just so funny to me, and I think that added a lot to the vibes of the book. It was such a cute little summary book. I will say it did not give me the exact feeling of a Lynn Painter book. It was more so of a Summer I Turned Pretty / To All the Boys kind of vibe, but I would recommend it to anyone who likes rom-coms because it was so fun. Because the more I make videos, the more apparent that it will be that I love rom-coms. They are my thing. And like I said in my Better Than Movies review, I love rom-coms just like Liz, and I love books just like Bailey in Betting on You. So this book was just right up my alley, and I really enjoyed it. And I gave it 4.5 stars because I liked it, but it wasn't exactly a 5-star read for me, but it was still really good. So Powerless by Lauren Roberts was the last book I read in July before school started, and I really liked it. I thought the premise was just like right up what I liked, because The Hunger Games, like I said earlier, is my favorite thing on earth, and I love books similar to it when they aren't dystopian, but that conversation will be in another video probably. And I also heard that it was very similar to Red Queen, and I did read that. I have not finished that series, but I am planning on doing a video series of reading books that I didn't finish or series that I DNF'd. But anyways, I was really hooked on the premise of this book, and I wanted to know all about Paden and Kai. I thought the world building was very easy to understand, like all of the elite powers, and I thought the main characters were given enough time to build up their characters and understand kind of what they were thinking. The chemistry between Kai and Paden was so... and I loved it so much. Kai's character was so well written, and I wanted to know so much more about his backstory. One thing that I did kind of hate, like I said earlier, I hate love triangles. I hated the fact that Kit and Kai both liked Paden, but obviously Paden did not have any interest in Kit. But anyways, I was quite baffled by the ending of this book. I literally stared at my wall for 30 minutes after I finished it. So it was kind of like shocking to me. I did not think that it would end up like that. I really loved reading all the moments between Kai and Paden, and Lauren did a really good job of writing the relationship. I wouldn't exactly consider it an enemies to lovers, like a true enemies to lovers. I think a true enemies to lovers is the Cruel Prince trilogy, where both of them are like actively trying to convince themselves that they hate the other person. This one is more so like Kai is obsessed with Paden, and Paden is like trying to have a hard time, to have a sort of disdain towards him, even though he's literally not done anything to make her not like him, and he's like been nice to her throughout the whole book. I thought it was really interesting how the book ended. Like I said, the cliffhanger was really well written, and there was also a lot of good lines in the book that I highlighted, and most of them were from Kai, but some of them were from Paden. This is from Kai. I'm not wearing green, but I feel it nonetheless. Envy clawed at me as I watched them step in time to the very waltz I led Paden through only last night. She looks elegant, enticing, and entrancing. We fit together perfectly, pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. But yeah, most of the lines that were really good in this book were from Kai, but some from Paden were good. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and at first I said that it was a 6-star book, but I think I was overly generous, and I gave it while I was still feeling the emotions that the ending gave me. But then I gave it 5 stars, but I haven't really thought of it that much after I finished it. Maybe I'll think of it if somebody reminds me of it, and I will think of it for like a little bit, but I wasn't like walking around my house just thinking about it. So I ended up deciding to give it a 4.5 stars already. So this is Reckless, and it was the last book that I read this summer. I read it the week before school started in August, and wow, so I actually enjoyed this one. I've seen a few reviews of people saying that it was repetitive and quite lacking, but I did enjoy it. I will say that plot-wise, Powerless is much better written, and I do consider this one to be a little bit more of a filler book. But I think I enjoyed this one more than Powerless because of the moments between Kai and Paden. I understand that this book was written to further their relationship and to set the scene for Fearless. And I didn't really notice it being repetitive or anything. I think mostly because I was kind of just like enjoying the vibes. But I think that the moments between Kai and Paden were less sparse in this book because they're literally together all the time. And you will, if you read this, you will see why I say that. They're literally, you know, interlocked, if you know what I mean. I will say that this one had a little bit less of a flowery prose on Kai's part. In Powerless, I was highlighting just like a ton of beautiful quotes, like I just showed you a few of them. But I didn't do this much this time around. Let me see if I can find any. I fear she could rival the stars. It felt like Kai, like the man behind the masks who looked at me like I was extraordinary. Even though, you know, I'm the embodiment of the weakness he has been taught to hate, ordinary. There's an intimacy in being reached for. This hair holds memories, and it's heavy. Repose not just fools with fancy words. I didn't say as many of the quotes from Powerless because a lot of them are from scenes, and I don't want to spoil, but these ones aren't that important, the things that I'm saying, so. I wasn't really paying attention much to the writing, so I didn't catch most of the grammatical errors that a lot of people talked about, and I did not see the ending coming. I know a lot of people have said like, oh, I knew exactly what was gonna happen from the moment that he said the little box, and I was like, what? How did you know that? Because I thought that the little box had a heart in it. I don't even know why. I thought it had like the dead king's heart in it. I don't even know why I thought that. But I did not see the ending coming at all. And I overall enjoyed the vibes of this one a little bit more than Powerless, but I enjoyed Powerless more as a book. I don't know if that makes sense. But I tend to read books on vibes, so I did this like this one more than Powerless, but looking back, it was not as good as Powerless, but it was still very great, and it was still really enjoyable. It is a very trope-heavy book, and it read more like a romance than a fantasy. It did miss the high stakes of Powerless, and I hope it is more present in Fearless, and I think it will be because of the way that this one ended. I think there was just something missing that Powerless had that this one didn't, which was plot. This one had more scenes between their love story, and it was done to further their story to set the scene for the next book. And I think this whole book could have honestly just been a novella. Like, you could have cut out half the times that situations that they're in repeat. But I did enjoy it purely based off the vibes. I did notice that there were 2 end scenes, and I don't know about you guys, but it made sense to me why Peyton kept repeating pretend. It wasn't really annoying to me because I'm very used to a lot of characters repeating words a lot of times in books, especially like the Hunger Games, where they repeat words over and over and over again to emphasize something or to, you know, convince themselves. So that's what it read like to me. And I have never read The Dancing Thieves. I started it, but I didn't finish Dancing Thieves. But I've heard that this one is super similar to that one, but I really just can't remember. The sewer scene in this one reminded me a lot of the sewer scene in Tangled. And I loved the scene where they were in the meadow. And I like the fact that we learned a little bit more about Kai's life before Peyton and about Ava. That made me cry. I wasn't really bothered by Kit's POV, to be honest. I was just mainly confused when it was his point of view, and I wanted it to go back to Kai or Peyton, but it wasn't completely unbearable like Apollo's in A Curse for True Love. It was more so like Jason's throughout Heroes of Olympus. He kind of felt like he didn't really need it, but it wasn't like terrible to read. It kind of shocked me that Kai and Peyton were alone together so much in this book. I didn't think that, like, in reality, if their situation was actually happening, that would not have happened. They would have always had somebody else with them. The settings were quite questionable, and something about Peyton felt like slightly off. I don't know what it was. There's a lot of information in this book. The ending had me baffled, and I think someone needs to tell Kai that Belle and these two end up together. I can't wait to read Fearless when it comes out. I want to learn more about Peyton's backstory and how the separations of ordinaries and the elites work. I want to know more about that, especially about the mixes. I want to learn more about them. And I didn't want to read Powerful, but I might just give it a try because I've heard really good things about it. But I'm gonna give this one a 4.25 stars. It could have been a 5 purely based off vibes, but there was something missing, like in Powerless. 5-star book has a very certain feeling for me, and I haven't really thought about this book since I finished it, so it's gonna stay in the 4s. So these are all the books that I read this summer, and it's actually not that many compared to how many I used to read when I was younger. I did enjoy most of these books. I tend to not really dislike many books. I don't think that I've ever given a book a 1 star. These books were all really interesting, and the themes and genres kind of just go all over the place, but I really enjoyed all of these. And I am gonna start making more vlog videos where I vlog what I'm reading, and then separately in a different video I'll make, you know, a wrap up of my actual ratings of books. I'm thinking of doing some series of me reading books from when I was younger, so keep watch out for that. Go follow my Instagram because I post cute little videos sometimes if you like that kind of content, and sometimes I post videos of me singing on there, so if that also interests you. I will be posting my review of Reckless and another book that I also read recently. But yeah, these are all the books that I read, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye!